Tom Perenzino, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, thanks for having me.
No, the gratitude's on my side. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and you truly have a busy schedule. Congratulations, your company had a baby, from what I
Yes,
understand. And
yes,
you
yes,
guys
we
are,
did.
yeah, and you guys are scrambling to get everything together. One of your employees, their wife had a baby, and so I appreciate you guys, coming on and despite all the rescheduling and things that you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. When the baby comes 2 weeks early, you're running around trying to get things filled. So
Yeah, never on time, are they? Right?
nope,
Stinking
nope.
babies coming early or late. um, but listen, we have you on the show today because you were actually messaging me and you told us something very important to the show that we have talked about for many years, and we haven't talked enough about this season. So you said, Ian, I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and you're right. We deliver a better service now, and our average inspection fee is a little over $1,000.
Yep.
That immediately set a light off on, and I'm like, I need to talk to this guy. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into that.
Sure.
Your name, your company, where you're located, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tom Perenzino. We covered that already, but I'm the owner of Modern Home Inspections. We're based out of Connecticut. We've been open for 6.5 years. We have a team of 4 inspectors, some operations folks, some ancillary people, a couple septic inspectors, and a radon mitigation installer.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's quite a large company.
Yep.
And you're located in Connecticut, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
said that. You know, what's pretty amazing about what you do, I'd like everyone to understand. You have all these people that work for you. You're charging $1,000 on average for an inspection, delivering an amazing service. Matter of fact, our podcast is called "Charge More, Deliver More." But I follow the markets in a large swath of the U.S. and Canada, and you're not very far from me in Connecticut. There,
Yep.
Connecticut's actually one of the markets that are hurting the most.
Yeah. I believe I saw a report the other day that Connecticut, the Northeast in general, was the worst in the state or the
Hmm.
country rather, and I believe Connecticut was on the top of that list.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we emphasize, because one of the things that I hear people say is, in my area, I can't charge more. In my area, I can't do this. In my area, and then insert whatever, I'm going to call it an excuse.
Sure.
I might get some flack for that. And, if you give me flack, everybody just go ahead, shoot me flack. I like listening to it. But we have you on in one of the hardest markets in the country right now. We had Preston Kincaid on one time, and he's in one of the hardest markets too.
Yes, he is.
So what you're doing is doable for all of us. So what motivated you to start charging essentially about 2.5 times the national average for inspections?
Yeah, I think it became a natural progression. And, to kind of piggyback on things you've talked about before, um, it's not just a home inspection. So there's a lot involved, and there's other services that people are looking for. Sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
don't even know that they're looking for those services. And as we have grown over the years, it's kind of been a progression of someone asks for a particular service and we don't provide it. Maybe it's the first time we heard about the service and we start looking into it and realize, hey, that's kind of in the same umbrella. And there's a few services that we just started looking into getting, trained and certified and start providing. There's other services that were a little riskier, like septic, for instance, where there's some specialized training, a lot of, some equipment and stuff that's needed. And in those cases, what we looked to do was find someone that was willing to subcontract with us. And we would do that for a while until we kind of had proof of concept that it works. And then for quality control reasons, we start looking at how can we bring this in-house. So we've kind of systematically done that throughout the years. And now we've built this list of services. In fact, our company slogan is "One call gets it all." So,
Nice.
when someone calls in and they're looking for, well, septic, radon, everything with their home inspection, they don't have to call 3 different companies. And particularly in our market, that was the norm. And I particularly remember a day that I knew this was the right path. when I had someone, and we were having some scheduling difficulties with the client's agent, and she was only available on a certain day or something along those lines, and we didn't have an opening in that time slot. And the client called back. I said, "Good luck. Here's a couple people you might call that I know do good work." And she called back about an hour later, and she said, "You said you have Friday at 2 or whatever it was open." I said, "Yeah." "And you could do all three services, the home, the well, the septic, all at once?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "All right, I don't care if my agent can be there or not. I'm scheduling it right now." And I was like, "Okay, this is the right path." And then we hear it from agents too. It makes, the referring real estate agents' lives simpler. They look better, all that stuff, where they just say, "Hey, call this guy, call this company. They'll get you set up. They'll get everything done for you."
Man, I wrote down a bunch of stuff while you were talking there. You just gave us several actionable items and several gold nuggets all in that. So here's a couple things I wrote down, and this is something after my own heart. Ancillaries is where the money's at.
Yeah, definitely.
We turn a $400 or $500 inspection into $1,000, $1,500. There's mornings where we walk away from the morning with almost $1,500
Yeah,
just for the morning,
yeah,
and the client's happy, and we give them a great service because we're standing there like, we're charging you $1,500 for our morning.
yeah,
We're gonna make sure you get a great product, and they're like, this is totally worth it. I didn't have to call 5 people, and it's all inclusive. Like, there's something to be said for, listen, I inspected the whole house, so I noticed the Orangeburg piping inside of the house, so I know that I'm going to have a problem out at the septic tank. I know there's going to be some issues that otherwise wouldn't have been connected.
yeah.
So,
Very
so it
true.
benefits everybody. But
It
you
really
said
does.
some, but you said something about proof of concept.
Hmm.
That was a really cool way of getting proof of concept. Can you reiterate that for us? Because I want everybody to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll use the septic as a prime example. I had met a couple guys on a septic inspection that were hired by the client directly. I was doing a home inspection early on, and we kind of hit it off. They were cool guys, and we just started chatting. And they mentioned that they'll do discounted home inspections or septic inspections for home inspectors, and we have an opportunity to mark it up $100, 150, whatever it was. And I said, "Oh, that's pretty awesome." And we started doing it almost right away, and did that for a couple years, and started noticing that, hey, this is a real thing. It works. The only downside ever was that, I can't quality control what, this other company is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But that stuff you can work through too. That's not that big of a deal as long as everyone's very clear on the expectations and all that stuff. And we did that for a handful of years. And I decided one day, okay, now let's do the math. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what our investment costs are, and so on and so forth. And the math worked out, and we pulled the trigger and brought it in house. And so now we have 3 septic inspectors on our team.
Man, that's awesome. And as a side point, septic inspections are my favorite. If we only ever did septic inspections for the rest of our lives, I'd be thrilled. They don't take nearly the level of intensity as a home inspection,
Yeah,
way less liability. You have to be completely ignorant and not looking at all to miss stuff.
yeah,
And worst case scenario, septic systems, you just a complete idiot and you miss it. It's like, okay, well, the tank is $5,000.
right.
All right. So it's not like a $50,000 roof. And people leave you alone when you're standing over a hole full of poop.
You're not wrong. For the sake of opening up a whole nother can of worms, I will mention that part of our business model with the septic was we do white label it for other home inspection companies in our market.
Mm.
And that has kept us booked out about 2 weeks.
White labeling inspection services.
Yeah,
Now, there's something I'd like to talk a little bit about.
yeah.
Did you have a little bit of market pushback with that? Because I've heard of other people saying they'd want to do it, but then they're like, no, nobody would ever do it. I've never actually met somebody who's white labeling quite that way.
Yeah. Yeah, we have had zero market pushback on it whatsoever. Um, we started doing it right away. Obviously, we're doing our company's stuff. The one thing that we did do is, even though we operate as one internal team, we did make the septic division, so to speak, its own legal entity. And
Mm-hmm.
that was very intentional, so that our our colleagues in our market didn't feel like they were hiring a competitor. We didn't want to blur those lines. We're not trying to take your agents or your inspections or any of that stuff. We're just providing you a service that you can make some extra money on, and make you look better also. And so the business practices and the way we go about stuff for our partners in the home inspection space, is the same way we do things for on the home inspection side for us. And so it works out very well, and it keeps those guys more busy. In fact, our third inspector's in training right now because we've been at over 100% capacity for weeks.
Man, well, if anybody ever wants proof of concept, there it is right there.
Yeah.
So well, first of all, anybody who's listening, I think what white labeling is, but white labeling is basically one company provides a service for another company and it makes it look like the other company's doing it. So how white label do you get? Do you show up with other companies' shirts and labels, or?
No, it's white label might be maybe not an exactly appropriate term. We're really the subcontractor for them, so
Yeah.
we don't try and hide who we are. And one of the main reasons for that is we provide post inspection support for that home inspection company's agents and clients. They're absolutely able to call us with questions and referrals for people who will repair septic systems and maintenance tips and stuff like that. So we didn't want to completely white label it, because then those home inspection companies, possibly, especially the guys that are single operators, they might not have the bandwidth to be able to manage that stuff. Plus, it's a different animal. So,
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because you don't. I can't imagine that you would be able to give your clients any kind of support if it's completely white labeled.
right.
Inspector doesn't really know what you looked at,
Yep.
and he's trying to tell people, well, subcontractor. So cool, yeah, it's still white label, but it's kind of like a different tier of it.
Yeah.
Man, you're doing a lot of cool stuff out there. Do you have a background in business, or is your background? What's your background?
My background's a little bit diverse. I did come from the corporate world. At one point, I was running multiple Verizon wireless corporate stores. In my younger years, I had owned a wholesale car business where we did repair work and sales and stuff like that. And then, believe it or not, I've been in the fire service for a long time, as well. So, as a firefighter paramedic, and actually, I still work as a career firefighter paramedic, 2 days a week, 24-hour shifts a week. So my background's a little bit diverse. So I don't have a business degree or a marketing degree or any of that type of stuff. I kind of I personally have always leveraged common sense and paying attention to what's going on around me, and then trying to really structure systems and processes around the stuff that we do so that it works. But yeah, my background is not necessarily in business.
Well, and you mentioned a degree there. A lot of us think a degree maybe makes us qualified. I don't even have a high school degree, but you could go to college and be for music, but you
Mm-hmm.
can never play like Eddie Van Halen. You didn't go to college for music,
For
you
sure.
know? Yeah. So that's pretty amazing. So what made you decide to start raising your prices and vicariously raising your level of service?
Yeah. So sometimes, and I will say, pricing fluctuates from time to time, and market dependent, season dependent. And it's one of the reasons that we don't post our pricing online. We want to talk to the person and explain how we're providing value, not just some random service. We use the term when people are talking to us, you're comparing apples to oranges, not apples to apples. We don't do the same thing as every home inspection company. Um, so we don't necessarily just raise. Obviously, that's the goal. But sometimes I will raise or lower prices on the back end in my ops team. I don't necessarily tell them. And there's some statistical reasons behind why we do that. But the goal is obviously to raise fees for a whole host of reasons. We can pay our people better and provide better support and value and systems and all that stuff. But one area that we decided not to discount, so to speak, was, okay, I'm adding 10 services. Am I going to get a discount? And, I had the realization that if they're going to call a home inspection company, and our price is pretty similar to every other home inspection company for a home inspection,
Hmm.
probably on the higher end of normal. And then they're going to do radon, and then they're going to do well and water testing, and they're going to do a septic, and they're going to call 3 different people for those 3 different services. They're not getting a discount to do that. So we price them fairly, but we don't necessarily discount because someone's done a bunch of different services with us. And the net result of that is a high ticket. And, I'll give you an example. We have an inspection on the calendar for next week that is a $675 home inspection, a $2,800 ticket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what brought it up to $2,800?
Absolutely. A well inspection, water testing, and they did a slightly more advanced water test, septic inspection, mold testing. Connecticut does have a very specific foundation problem here, and we are certified to evaluate those. So they
I've
added
heard,
that service.
I've heard of those, yeah.
Yeah, termite inspection. I think that's it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But still, that's a pretty fancy ticket. And a lot of people criticize when we talk on the podcast, one of the biggest flack we get back is, I want to give people the best home inspection for the cheapest price.
Yep.
That bothers me so much because that's like saying, I want to give you the best steak for the cheapest price. You're still going to end up with a cheap steak.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say that we're charging more so that we can provide a good value to people, and we're not racing to the bottom. We're trying to build a top tier team that the A+ players that do their job very well, provide good service and all that stuff. So you can't do that if you're, quote, trying to race to the bottom with price.
And that's important. You're not a single inspector firm. So a single inspector firm saying, listen, I'm the best inspector in the universe, and I choose for some crazy reason to charge $250 for all my inspections. Okay. Strange, but you do you, buddy.
Yeah.
But you have people. You cover a larger service area and you hire people. If you charge less, would you have the same level of personnel that you have now?
No, wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah. And I guess that's the point. When people, I'll tease my uncle here for a while. My uncle I was very close to. He used to get irritated at the people at McDonald's when they wouldn't make his burger right. And I'm like, and even as a kid, I'm like, well, pay $3 more for the burger. But none of us would do that because we're like, it's McDonald's. We went there because it's at the time, $1 McChicken and, $1 whatever burger. And it's like, we get what we pay for, but then we're not happy when we pay for it.
Yeah.
Have you been following some of the stuff some home inspection forums, but some of the stuff with AI that people are worried about in our industry? Have you been following some of that?
Yeah, very closely.
So one of the things that personally I feel, and I've heard others express it, is that AI eventually, and I don't think it's soon, I don't think it's going to be in the next couple of years, will eventually make the barrier of entry so low that somebody with very low skills can hire a bunch of other people with low skills to go in with AI, scan a house, find like 60% of the stuff, and then give people a McDonald's version of a home inspection.
Very possible.
Guys like you, I don't think are going to go.
No, I don't think so either. I think there'll always be a place for quality work.
Yeah. And I guess we're kind of circling the point that we're both saying. High quality work is never going to go out of business.
No.
Because there is, what is it? Not Longhorn, but Texas Roadhouse was named the #1 steakhouse in the country. Yeah, I know. We laugh. It's good. I don't mind it.
Right.
But that, and it put out all these other small steakhouses in areas when it moves in.
Yeah.
But it doesn't put out places like Ruth Chris's, even though that's a chain, or these big fancy ones down in New York City. They don't care about Texas Roadhouse coming in and pushing them out.
Right.
Do you think that your business model is going to be sustainable, though? Like, how far do you think you can push it?
It's a good question. When in relation to AI, I can't necessarily answer that question because it's moving so rapidly. We're expecting to land somewhere around 10 to 11% market share in Connecticut. That's kind of like the next phase for us. But we are leaning heavily into AI in a bunch of different ways. In fact, I've mandated my operations team spend 10% of their time either utilizing or playing or researching AI products, and and we're using it in a bunch of different ways that make them more effective and the field team more effective. So, I don't know what it's going to do to our industry as a whole. I know that we will pivot and make it work no matter what.
Oh, and I 100% agree with that. Higher end companies like you are going to own it and not worry about the lower ends losing out to it. It's just a natural way of things.
Yeah.
You just said that, and I really just want to emphasize this. You said you're going to get 10 to 11% market share is what you're planning on in Connecticut. What do you have now, if you don't mind me asking?
We sit right around 3% market share
For all of Connecticut?
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, man. Okay, so um charging the prices that you do, that people are like, whoa, that's crazy. In one of the hardest markets in the country, you own 3% market share in an entire state.
Yeah.
I think you should do this podcast. I think
I don't know about that. We do have a financial coach that's industry specific, and there's some evaluation of our market size and all that stuff. And we came to the determination that 10-11% was very doable, even up to 15%. Was doable. It's not easy. It's a lot of work.
mm-hmm.
But doable. In some smaller markets, so we'd be considered a mid-sized market.
Mm-hmm.
Some very small markets, there's inspectors out there with 30-40% of their market share. So if they cover 3 counties or something like that, and there's 10 inspectors in those counties, and it's reasonable for some of those to get 30-40% market share. As the market size grows, market share numbers are obviously more difficult to obtain. But in
Mm-hmm.
a market our size, it is reasonable to get that 10-11% market share.
That's amazing. So I think all of us, I am learning a lot from you. All of us can learn from you. If somebody is sitting here listening to the podcast right now saying, okay, this is like the 50th time that Ian's talked about this, raising prices. I raised my prices $25 last year, so I'm good. And I laugh because somebody just sent me their new price list, and it was literally out of their whole price tier. There was like 10 price tiers on their list. They went up $25 on 7 out of them. And I'm like, that's okay. That's a beginning.
Yep.
That's incremental, but that's your first price increase in 4 years.
Yep.
What advice would you give specifically to 1 and 2 man shows? Because that's where I see the problem at the most. And I'm working with a company right now, and he's hiring his first inspector, and he's just like, we're not making much money. I'm like, because you can't charge $350 for a home inspection,
Right.
and pay that guy, cover your expenses, step back from your own inspections, and still make good money. You'd have to have 500 inspectors.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And I just want to make one quick point that I think a lot of single man, and I certainly didn't when I started in this. I didn't know that as you grow an operation, your profit margin obviously decreases. I think everyone probably knows that, but I think what a lot of people don't know is that in our industry specifically, if you're going to grow an operation and have multiple inspectors and support team to on the backside of that, if you're doing things well, your profit margin is going to be somewhere around 20%. And there's some fluctuation for years that you're putting marketing in or training people and so on and so forth. But long term, that's kind of the goal, right around that 20% mark. So if you're only charging $350 and that's even your average fee, you're making $70 on that. And you can't, and you still got to pay your people and pay your software and insurances and all the stuff that go along with that. I might have an unpopular opinion on 1 and 2 man operations, but I think they should be charging more than I do. And I think that, as a multiple inspection company owner, I have a duty to my people to keep their calendar full as best I can. And so I have to be price sensitive at times. We're always looking on how to provide more value so that we can continue raising prices over the years. But if you're a very good, reputable single man shop or two guys, whatever, your calendar's probably full. And one thing that you can do when your capacity is maxed out is raise your prices. And one of my friends years ago, he owns a successful business in a different industry, and we were just talking about price, and he said to me in these exact words: "Raise your prices until the phone stops ringing."
Mm.
And that is never, it's never left my head. And I'm like, he's right. I'm not saying go out there and just gouge everybody and do something crazy, but you should be systematically raising your prices. And listen, if it's January and you're in a market where it's dead like that, I know, some areas of the country it's flip flopped, but anywhere it gets cold in the winter and the real estate market slows down, bring your prices down a little bit if you have, open slots on your calendar this week and get some work in. And I'm not saying drop them down to $350, drop them $50, whatever it might be. You should be shopping your competitors, by the way, also, so you know what wiggle room you have to stay competitive. But if for the last 2 weeks, and I'm a single guy and I do 10 inspections a week, or that's all I have available, and I've had 10 inspections for the last 2 weeks. Guess what? Next week, raise your prices 50, 75, $100. The people who are referring to you because you do excellent work, they're still going to use you. And I can't tell you how many times in the inspection community, in some mastermind groups I'm part of, where I hear people say, I raised my prices $75 the first time and no one batted an eye.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. They're calling you for a reason. Are there price shoppers out there? 100%. And the bigger you get, and you get into digital marketing and all those types of things, you're going to get price shoppers without question. And our team's KPIs around that should be closing 65% of those clients that are just price shopping, but 95% is the KPI for referral clients calling in.
Yeah, and you said some great things there, and I'm going to remember that. If anybody remembers anything from this podcast, raise your prices till the phone stops ringing. That's a good simplification of very complex math.
Yeah.
Well, you just quoted some fairly complex math and you work off of statistics.
Yep.
There's some complex math of if you have a lot of demand, raising your prices or increasing your product are the only two ways to address that in reality.
Correct.
So,
or
and you really, yeah. So why, for as home inspectors, like if we're charging $350 for a home inspection, our phone's ringing off the hook. Why would we hire more home inspectors to feed a desire,
right,
rather than raise our prices and control that desire and make more per inspection?
Yep.
When you were a single operator, I mean, did you start off low and go high, or?
I actually started, so in Connecticut, I think your market might be similar, where you have to intern under somebody for.
No,
Oh,
actually, Connecticut is you can intern under New York State.
okay.
It's not required. It's 100 fee paid inspections in New York. That's one of two ways to get your license.
Okay.
In Connecticut, you guys are very different. You have to intern, and usually you have to pay the person, right?
Yeah, I paid thousands of that. Over $10,000 I paid to have somebody intern me.
Yeah.
I actually took his pricing model and I added $50 to it day one because I always thought he didn't charge enough, and I started that way. And then I just every once in a while, with no statistics to back it, because I certainly was not tracking metrics and things like that back in the day like I do now, where I kind of lived and die by numbers. But I would every once in a while just raise the price a little bit, like I said before, to see what happens. And I also would be blown away when people still just book the inspection.
And I think that's the key. We all worry that everyone's going to bat an eye,
mm-hmm.
but everybody who's raised their prices just goes, nobody batted an eye. Mm-hmm. Unless you're just completely pricing yourself out like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Most people are going to go, oh, okay. I go to the gas station. I order a slice of pizza. I don't sit there and compare it to, how much did you charge before?
Right.
Like, this is the pizza I like. Even my mechanic, I'm pretty sure he's charging more than he ever has. But I like my mechanic. He does a good job. And I'm like, I'm not going to look for the cheapest mechanic. That's my car.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think it's important for people when it comes to pricing as the business owner, to not get hung up on pricing mentally. So when you're talking to people about what something costs, you should take a few hours someday and sit down and write out all the reasons why you think you are the best at what you do. And when someone's talking to you about price, you can talk to them about value and the
Mm-hmm.
things that you do and the things that are unique to you. And, at the end of the day, the average consumer just thinks home inspection, they're all the same. And that's your opportunity to let them know that what you do is different or better or whatever. And, I think they're called USPs, unique selling points or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have those. And if you have people that are answering phones for you, they should have those.
You know, that's a fantastic point, because early on in my career, I used to think that everybody was looking at price. It's not as high a number of people looking at price as we think they are.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one bad client makes all of our other clients look bad. One grumpy person in the store ruins the rest of the day for the clerk.
Yeah.
One price shopper makes us think that everybody's asking about price. There was an inspector recently. He's like, Ian, my agent said he didn't like this, and I'm like, okay. He's like, everybody's talking about it. I'm like, how many? Comes out it was just this one person, but that one person had affected his thinking process to think that everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
I'm not a price shopper.
And
When
you,
I call people, I'm like, just a reasonable price. I'll usually ask that last. I'm like, just do the job right, or just show up.
yeah,
You know, people have people aren't as much as price shoppers as we think they are, and the price shoppers are the ones we want to avoid anyways. We don't want to work for them.
they are the most
Do you?
difficult clients typically.
Oh my goodness! If you don't mind me asking, and without sparing you my stories, why are they the most difficult clients in your opinion?
It just seems like they're the neediest post inspection or the most likely to complain that you missed something very minor or that wasn't in the scope, or they they sometimes are the people that didn't even read their inspection report and then they call you with a complaint, and it turns out it was written right in their report. Obviously that's a generalization of price shoppers, but it does seem to follow that path.
Yeah, anecdotally, we're not classifying anybody.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, yeah, that's kind of what it's going to be.
Yeah.
There's always going to be the single mom trying to make her way, and she's going to ask about price.
100%.
Different than a quote unquote price shopper than what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
And obviously, like, price matters to some people, and from a slight psychology point, or standpoint, like our phone team, the goal is to never end the conversation on price.
Mm-hmm.
So the price has got to come before, earlier on in the conversation, and then you explain all the reasons why the price is what it is. And that, if you just end on price, it's $750, and then they're like, all right, I'll call you back. But if it's
Mm-hmm.
$750 and here's all the things we're going to do for you, here's the things that are included with your inspection, very different conversation psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Actually, we have a podcast on our script, and that's one thing that somebody taught me a long time ago. Never end on price.
Yeah.
Always end on why you're awesome.
I'm pretty sure
Something
I
that
found
I
it in a
did.
book somewhere too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and something I did for myself psychologically was I trained myself to almost be a little offended when people ask price. Like, not let it show or anything, but like I trained myself so that way it wouldn't get me focused on all they care about is price. So now I'm like, oh, and internally I'd be like, how dare you?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it gets us out of that mentality
It does.
of what we think people are looking for.
Yeah.
And then we can ask ourselves, is that maybe what we tend to infer our own emotions and thinking on things and other
100%.
people.
That's so
So
true.
maybe we are price shoppers. Maybe we're always looking for the bargain, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean everybody else is.
You're right. And I'll admit, when I was the one answering the phones, I would be afraid to position some ancillary services at times, because I'm like, okay, we've reached enough for this person. Like they can't possibly spend another $150. But as soon as I took myself out of the equation, who's going to be the most emotionally attached to this entire business, and I had an operations team doing that, I'm like, holy cow, they sell way more than I do.
Yeah. We get in our own way sometimes.
Yeah.
So is that what you did? Is you hired someone else to sell for you? Did your prices go up then? It sounds like.
Yeah, systematically just keep kind of climbing up and up with that. Yeah, so we have two people that answer phones Monday through Friday. I still take the nights and the weekends for the most part, and answer the phones. But yeah, they do a much better job than I do. Plus, the phone gets answered every time, as opposed to have to call people back and you miss that job.
Yeah, nice. I've always felt that that's important. If
Yeah,
we're even as a single inspector, if we're answering our own phones, we're just missing work.
without
So we say,
question.
well, I can't afford to hire somebody. If we're charging $1,000 for our average inspection fee, if we miss 3 phone calls, that's $3,000 we missed that week. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, and it's honestly more of an investment than it is an expense, because not only, like you just said, are you not missing work, and so just do the math on what one or two missed jobs a week is. It probably pays for that person at a gross number, but it provide if you do it right, you set up the right systems and processes. You now have a support team to support everything else going on. I don't have to upload, lab reports, and I don't have to track things down or reschedule things or any of the things that make the inspectors be able to just have a seamless, just go do a great inspection and be awesome to the client and agent. The operations team is the unsung heroes in the background, making it all look perfect. And that's obviously not without mistake, but they are a part of that value that never really gets seen, but it gets felt by everyone involved in the transaction.
so you actually pre-answered my last question because the podcast is charge more, deliver more.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that we don't always think about. When we charge more, we can have a support team, a support system, a more seamless interaction with our clients. If we find ourselves getting multiple emails or sometimes angry emails, hey, where's that lab report? Hey, we've been waiting on this for 3 days.
Yep.
Those micro interactions add up.
Without question. And that is its own work in some manner, right? You have to be diligent about putting really defined systems and processes in place. The example you gave of uploading lab reports, we have a process for that. When they come into the email boxes, they all go to one person's job is to upload them, and she also has a weekly audit process to make sure every service someone paid for has a corresponding report, and if it's not there, track it down. Maybe it hasn't come in yet, and get it uploaded so that there's no delay. And those are the types of things that, particularly for your real estate agents, because they deal with you more than just one time or two times, they're the ones who really eventually feel that, even if they don't know that's part of the process.
Yeah, it's like an old painter told me one time. He goes, the devil's in the details. People
Mhm.
will look at a wall and say, hey, that looks great. He goes, they don't notice all the details. They just notice at the end, wow, this looks better than what the other guy
It's
did.
very true.
Yeah. So those micro interactions is a big part, in my opinion, of the the value that you deliver to somebody because you charge more.
I totally agree.
People get what they want without knowing that they want it.
I totally agree. I've told people that outside of extenuating circumstances for geography, my inspectors never pick up radon machines. We have someone that
Nice.
does that.
We do too,
Yeah,
actually.
I just want these guys to go do great inspections. We'll handle everything else.
Well, and then think about that too. I've always said this: the worst thing that I ever had to do as an inspector was go pick up radon tests.
It's terrible.
Oh my goodness, the seller's there. The half the time they're in a bad mood because he found some stuff and
Yep,
trying to coordinate getting in, and I'm like, it took a half of a home inspection scheduled time slot to be able to go and try to pick this thing up.
yep,
You know, that in of itself allows your inspectors to have a clearer mind, happier day,
yep,
focus on doing a great job,
yep.
because that's really what we're selling is the home inspector's mind.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. It allows me to attract A players.
Yeah. We could do like 8 podcasts out of this. I really like meeting people that know their numbers, know their business. And funny, you've done several things that I've done over the years, and I'm really impressed with what you've done with it.
Thank you.
So yeah,
It's been
thank
quite
you
a
for
journey.
being on the. What's that?
It's been quite a journey.
Oh yeah, it's not linear, right? It's like
No,
that old cartoon where it shows a guy standing on a cliff and they're like, "Look how successful he is," and on the
tons of
back it
dropping
shows all the
downs,
scars. Yeah.
tons of days where, as I said to my wife, I hope this pays off someday.
Well, you can tell that it has paid off. You have a great business. You have 3% of the market share of Connecticut, and the market right now is not great. The real estate market is looking harsh, and all this other stuff, and you're owning it. So you're living proof of that.
Thank you.
And the fact that you took time off with this big crew, big company, lots of stuff going on to talk to everybody today about it, I can't thank you enough. I'd love to have you on another time.
Yeah,
Anything, any kind of subject you want to talk about, we'd love to have you on. But Tom, awesome job. Thank you so much for sharing. And everybody, if you want proof that that it works, raising your prices and delivering more, look at Tom. Perfect example.
thank you, Ian. I really appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll talk soon, Tom.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks, Ian.